All right, it is time to get in the lead, ladies and gentlemen. Hello and welcome to our very first podcast. I am your host, TJ Temple. Now we're going to start this podcast with a little bit of a primer about me and what this podcast is going to be. So let's start with that. About me, first of all, I've been a racing fan my entire life. I'm almost 28 years old. I've been a racing fan for my entire life. So I kind of know what I'm talking about when I talk about things that are happening with NASCAR and with IndyCar. I'm starting to get into more IndyCar. I haven't been involved in that as much as I'd like to be, but I am starting to get involved in that a little bit more. And you'll be hearing that more, especially as we get closer to the month of May and the Indianapolis 500 and well beyond that. Now, what this podcast is going to be, really. This podcast is going to be just me talking into a microphone about what we see on the racetrack. Like last night with the Daytona Duels. We'll get into that in a minute. Yeah, so basically, just what you see on the racetrack. And we'll talk about news that's also going on off the racetrack, too. Any major changes, like the IndyCar season finale is moving to Nashville Superspeedway. That's a big news item. We'll talk about that, too. Stuff like that, as well as what you see on the racetrack. So without further ado, now that you got that primer and that idea of what we're going to talk about, basically, this podcast is going to be just a fan talking to other fans. Is what I want this podcast to be. Just a fan talking about racing for other fans to listen to. Maybe occasionally we'll have a guest on here or two, and we'll talk to them about what they think, So that's basically what this is. A podcast from a racing fan for racing fans. That's what I want this to be. So without further ado, let's start talking about what we saw last night in Daytona and preview what's ahead this weekend in Daytona. So, the Daytona Duels last night, they were actually, I thought, and this may be just me, but I don't know, that might have been the most exciting duels we've had in a long time. I can't remember. I tweeted this last night, by the way. Follow me on Twitter at TJ Temple Media, or X, or whatever it's called now. But my social there is TJ Temple Media. Follow me there. I tweeted last night. I said that was the most exciting duel races we've had in a long time, and I can't remember the last time a duel race was that exciting. Of course, Blaney had every right to be upset in that second duel race last night. The Toyotas, it's kind of ironic. The Fords dominated the front row. And the Toyotas dominated the duel races last night. Tyler Reddick won the first one. Christopher Bell won the second one. And I find it, I find that very interesting. And everybody was talking about, the Toyotas don't have speed. Well, they sure showed it last night. They have a ton of speed, and they may be dangerous come Sunday in the Great American Race. Now, I want to talk about Blaney for a moment. I just talked about him, but I want to talk about Blaney for a moment. He had every right to be upset last night, and you could hear it in his interview at the Care Center for Fox. You've seen it also on social media if you paid close attention. He was upset because guys keep throwing, or they're not throwing bad blocks, but just throw a bad push, and it sends him to the inside or to the outside wall. And I agree with him. I think he does have a right to be upset. Again, I tweeted this last night, so if you follow me on Twitter, I talked about this last night. That's just a product of super speedway racing. When guys throw bad blocks or don't know how to push, they get antsy and they just forget how to drive on these super speedway tracks. And it causes stuff like that. And you got to feel for Blaney. He has taken some hard hits in the last year or so. He took that hard hit at Nashville last year. He took He had that hard hit last night, too. But I think it goes to show the safety of these race cars. If you were watching the onboard from Blaney's car last night, you seen his body shake around, but you seen those big foam things around his head kind of protect him. And that is just goes to show the advancement of these race cars in terms of safety. So, but yeah, Blaney had every right to be upset. I don't blame him. If I was a product of that, or if I was on the receiving end of that, I would be upset too. But he is the defending champion. Hopefully he can rebound from this and maybe, come back and win the race on Sunday. We'll see. We'll just have to see. We're going to talk about the rest of the weekend and how weather may play a factor in this weekend. That is coming up in a moment. It is one of the biggest weekends of the year. It's Daytona. Need I say more? Actually, I am going to say more. Yes, it's a big weekend for the NASCAR Cup Series. It's their opening weekend at Daytona, not just for the Cup Series, but for the Xfinity Series and the Truck Series. The Truck Series races tonight as I'm recording at 7:30 on FS1. That race should go off without a hitch. Looking at the weather forecast, the weather should be fine for tonight's race, for tonight's truck race. Tomorrow's Xfinity race may be a different story. That may not happen according to the forecast because they're calling for about 60 to 70% chance of rain, so that may not happen tomorrow. The 500 actually might happen. Looking at the forecast, either it's going to be a primetime race or it's going to get pushed to Monday. We'll just have to see, but hoping, fingers crossed, we get the race in. I'm hoping, and I'm just keeping my fingers crossed that we get this race in this weekend at some point, and I have no doubt that we will. I'm not going to pick a winner because it's Daytona. Basically, if you're in the race, you have a shot to win the race, and I'm not going to try to predict a winner, but I will say, if we've seen anything like we've seen last night in terms of the racing, I think we're in for a great show this weekend. I just hope that we get a great show. I have no doubts that we will. Daytona always excites. It always performs well in the spotlight, and I think we're in for a good show this weekend. I do want to say one quick thing before I get off of here, is Kaz Grala. I'm glad he made the race. Jimmy Johnson, the 7-time champ, he made the race. He had to race his way in. The finishes for both of those drivers to get into the main show was very exciting. I can't tell you, that was exciting to watch. And I'm so glad that both of those guys get a chance to get in the big show and race in this weekend's Daytona 500. And one more thing. I know I just said one more thing, but I'm going to say another one more thing. If you follow me on Twitter, or if you know me long enough, my loyal, people who pay attention to what I say, I'm not a fan of the 22. And I've made that abundantly clear. I'm not going to talk trash about him on this podcast, so don't worry. All you Joey Logano fans out there, and I'm friends with one of them, trust me, I hear it. I am not going to trash him on this podcast. Don't worry. That is not going to happen. I respect him as a person. I don't like him as a driver, but I'm not going to trash him. Nor am I going to trash any of the drivers. Even the ones that I don't like. And even the ones that I do like, I will criticize when it's due, but I will not trash talk anybody. I'll criticize a driver if needed, but I won't I won't talk trash about him. I'm not going to do that. Just on this podcast. So I'm hoping we're going to have a great race weekend, weather permitting. Hopefully the weather will cooperate. We don't know. We'll just have to see. In the meantime, we'll be back again on Monday or Tuesday. It's probably going to be Tuesday, discussing what we've seen at Daytona in all of the series, and we'll talk about it all on Tuesday or Monday, just depending. Just check social media at TJT Podcast to see when you'll find the episode recapping all of this, or follow my personal Twitter at TJ Temple Media. I will share when we will talk about what we've seen at Daytona this weekend. Enjoy the races. Enjoy your weekend. I'll talk to you next week.